From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 21st, 2022. Well, we begin at the United Nations today, where heads of state from around the world have been addressing the annual General Assembly, including today the president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, who in his speech claimed the Islamic Republic's nuclear program was a peaceful one and accused Israel of being a quote-unquote occupying savage power. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, walked out of the room ahead of Raisi's speech, holding a picture of his Holocaust survivor grandparents, and tweeted, "A murderer like Raisi, who denies the Holocaust amongst many human rights violations, has zero place on the world stage." He asked for proof, Erdan said. "Here are my Auschwitz surviving grandmothers." That in reference to Raisi's comments earlier this week on 60 Minutes, where he questioned the Holocaust. Erdan further called on his fellow ambassadors to leave the room as well, saying a dictator deserves no voice. Erdan was cited by the Times of Israel, saying it is a new moral low for the UN. A mass murdering Holocaust denier gets the podium at the UN to speak his hatred. Every ambassador that stays to hear him should be embarrassed. U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the UNGA today as well, speaking on Russia's assault of Ukraine, climate change, and conflicts around the world, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Biden also reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to Israel.
The United States is committed to Israel's security, full stop, and a negotiated two-state solution remains, in our view, the best way to ensure Israel's security and prosperity for the future and give the Palestinians the state to which they are entitled. Both sides to fully respect the equal rights of their citizens, both people enjoying equal measure of freedom and dignity.
Regarding Iran, Biden reaffirmed the U.S. position on its nuclear program.
The United States is clear. We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. I continue to believe that diplomacy is the best way to achieve this outcome.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid met on the sidelines of the UNGA with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdan today, the first meeting between an Israeli premier and a Turkish president since the announcement of the restoration of full diplomatic representation and the return of ambassadors and consuls general to the countries. Lapid's office also saying that the two leaders today discussed the fight against terrorism in Israel, and Lapid thanked Erdogan for intelligence cooperation at the time of Iran's attempts to carry out terrorist attacks against Israelis on Turkish soil. The prime minister also brought up the issue of missing and captive Israelis and the importance of bringing them home, as well as other regional issues. Yesterday, Lapid met with the King of Jordan, Abdullah II. This meeting, Lapid's office said, is an additional expression of the tightening of Israel-Jordan relations and the continued strengthening of the personal connection between the Prime Minister and the King of Jordan. Lapid's office said the Prime Minister spoke with His Majesty about the need for calming the situation on the ground and halting terrorism ahead of the upcoming Jewish holidays. Prime Minister Lapid emphasizing that Israel will not stand idly by and will fight terrorism directed against it in all its forms and will not allow harm to the security of its citizens. Lapid also met yesterday with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, where he noted that he expects the Secretary General will act to rectify the discriminatory treatment of Israel at the United Nations. Lapid, by the way, will address the UN General Assembly tomorrow, Thursday. Turning now to some other news, an elderly Israeli woman was found dead on the street in the city of Hulon in central Israel yesterday in what was believed to have been a terrorist assault. She was named today as 84-year-old Shulamit Rachel Ovadia. The Palestinian suspected of her murder took his own life and was found today in an abandoned building in Tel Aviv. The IDF said it apprehended 5 individuals in the town of Sarta in the West Bank suspected of assisting in the attack, vowing we will continue to operate in the fight against terrorism. Lapid was updated on the incident while in New York, and the Times of Israel cited his response, delivered through a spokesperson, saying this is a shocking attack by a despicable and cowardly terrorist who murdered an elderly woman who could not fight back. And the Prime Minister last night addressed the FIDF Friends of the IDF Gala in New York City, where he spoke to the hundreds in attendance about the critical need for Israel's strong military force and for the U.S.-Israel relationship.
The fact that I'm standing here today as Prime Minister of the State of Israel, a free country with a strong army, with friends like you, did not happen on its own. We learned the lesson. At every moment, Israel must be strong, free, and secure, with a powerful army that can defend its citizens. The United States has stood by our side from the very beginning. This bipartisan friendship is one of the cornerstones of Israel's security. It is touching, and most importantly, it cannot be taken for granted.
Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, September the 21st at 7 o'clock, it's Talmud Study. At 7:30, a panel discussion featuring 3 American perspectives on antisemitism with Jacob Kornbluh, April Powers, and Andrew Rehfeld. At 8, Robert Siegel explores the topic of free speech in an age of disinformation and social media with Lawrence Tribe, Jelani Cobb, and Jeffrey Rosen. At 9, Mark Golub leads a panel of rabbis on the themes they believe are important to address in high holiday sermons: Chaim Steinmetz, Grabelle Herrmann, and Marcelo Kormis. At 10:30, artists reflect on how art can illustrate and enhance high holiday texts. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, September the 21st, 2022. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well.